eating while doing their cardio. I can imagine someone just eating a waffle while doing their biking. Hi Team Momentum, it's Sean here, and of course I've got another jam-packed episode for you. Straight away we're going to get into it. Today we're talking about what is the most effective cardio when it comes to burning fat. Now there are ultimately three types. We're going to cover today HIIT training, LISS training, and also fasted. So let's get straight to it. Watch all the way through to the end so that you can understand which one is going to work better for you. Now for those of you who don't know, my name is Sean and I've been a personal trainer and a coach specializing in body composition for the last 10 years. This is literally what I do to help people get leaner, stronger, and also feeling better. Let's get straight into it now and start talking about cardio. So before we start though, I want you guys to let me know. In the comment section down below, let me know what type of cardio do you do and also which one do you think is the most effective when it comes to burning fat. This is either going to be your HIIT training or high intense training, LISS training or low intensity training, and also your fasted training, which is when you do your fasted cardio with no food. Now we're going to go through each of these in more detail. The first thing we're going to cover is what is each of these trainings. The second thing that we're going to go through is the energy source. What does it use to actually give you the energy to do that source of training? The third thing that we're going to go through is the timing. How are you going to use this with the time that you have, and also what's the limitation in terms of how long you can go for? The fourth one is the most important, and we need to talk about this because it's about popularity. Because as we all know, some types of cardio have been more popular than others because of marketing and the fitness industry. Anyway, we're going to start talking about the very first one, HIIT training. So first things first, what is HIIT training? HIIT training is what we call high intense interval training. And maybe you would have seen it in some very popular forms of gyms and clubs, not naming any names, but it starts with F and ends with 45. This is something that has been revolutionizing the industry as of now because we start to understand what we need. So first of all, let's start talking about interval training. What is it? High intense interval training is typically split into intervals or stations. So you might be doing 15 seconds on a station, resting 45 seconds, and then moving on to the next station. Or you might be doing 15 seconds on the air bike, resting 45 seconds, and going for another 15 seconds. Now this is not limited to any other types of movements as well. This includes burpees, rollers, running and sprinting, anything that you wish, as long as there is a rest to high intensity amount of interval breakdown. This is so that you can actually have a bit of rest time to obviously push as hard as possible. Now this is the geeky part, this is what I love. We're going to start talking about the energy sources required. So for those of you who don't know the energy sources, you may get lost on this. I'm not going to break it down too much, but you can study about that a little bit more, or if you want to know more, just let me know down in the comments section below. So when you're working with high intense interval training, the high intense interval part is typically between 10 to 15 seconds. Now, in terms of what energy system we're using, we're first going to be using what we call the PCR system. The PCR system is a phosphate creatine system, and all you need to know about this is it gives you energy between the first 7 seconds, 0 to 7 seconds. This now becomes more effective and your power output becomes really, really high, meaning you get really efficient in the first 15 seconds. The concept of the last 45 seconds when you're resting is you trying to regain and trying to recuperate all those phosphate creatine little and the concept between those 45 seconds of rest is having all those little molecules of phosphate creatine trying to recuperate and rejoin again so you can break it back down to release more energy. Yes, very geeky, I understand that. So long term, it's not going to be very good because we can only store so much phosphate creatine system, and what ends up happening is we start moving on to our next energy system, which is the glycolytic system. Now, a byproduct of the glycolytic system is what we call typically in the industry lactic acid. My lecturer would kill me if he actually heard me say that, but for you guys, I'm calling it lactic acid. It's actually hydrogen ions. So when we have a buildup of these hydrogen ions, you start to feel a little heavy in the muscles, the lactic acid starts to cramp up, nothing starts to work because this is negatively charged. I didn't intend to actually go this geeky with my science, but it's coming to me and now it's going. You guys have to learn this now. There's no other way around it. So what happens is now you're going to start feeling crampy and you probably want to throw up afterwards. This is what we call high intense interval training and when you've met your lactate threshold. Now, Why is this such a popular thing? The reason why is because you can potentially burn more in less time, but it requires a lot of skill, and also saying that it's a high first step for you to have to get really good at this. This is something why I do not encourage people to do HIIT training, because it also has a high risk, high reward, meaning you can potentially hurt yourself easier by doing things at a high fatigue level. That's HIIT training in a nutshell. Now, the second most popular one that I hear all the time that everyone wants to do is fasted cardio. Is fasted cardio actually good for you? Well, first of all, let's talk about it. As the name suggests, fasted cardio is you doing cardio and actually not eating anything in between. So maybe you might have ate the night before, or maybe you fasted for 8 hours and now you're going to do cardio. The concept and the thought is that people will burn more fat because there's nothing in your stomach. But as we all know, the body is not that stupid, because we store a lot of our carbohydrates in the form of blood glucose or glycogen under the skin and muscles. So if you're going to be using energy, it's going to break it out of that first. So now when it comes to fasted cardio, typically you should be doing this in the low intense state. So this kind of breaks down to low intense steady state, but you're doing it with no food. Why people think this is popular, I am not sure. I think this comes into the very old school mentality of bodybuilding when people were doing it in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and now we're in 2022 as I record this, and we're still doing this. No idea. Did I do this? Yes, I did, because back in the 90s and early 2000s, there was not much research, and people with PhDs in fat science and also being double scooped as, bodybuilders and prep coaches, they weren't existent just yet. So I'm not going to actually talk too much about this, but I can show you two people who will say the exact same thing of what I agree with. So first of all, there's Dr. Lane Norton, who will explain this as well, and he can do it much better than me. Fasted cardio versus non-fasted cardio typically gives you the same thing. The net difference is 0. So if you're having fasted cardio, you will tend to burn more fat in the actual interval of you exercising, versus a person who is going to be eating while doing their cardio. I can imagine someone just eating a waffle while doing their biking. What I'm talking about is someone who has fed themselves and then done cardio, is that they will tend to not burn as much fat during the actual exercise itself, but they will burn more fat during the whole day. So you tell me, which one would you rather do when you're trying to actually time yourself to be efficient for your day? The reason why I bring this up is because who has time, and depends on each person's lifestyle, to be able to wake up first thing in the morning while they're fasted to go do cardio and then come back and do their gym training. This is non-practical for a lot of people, which is why I always tell people, like I would do myself, to go do their LISS cardio after their training. The popularity of this typically comes from the old school bodybuilding coaches or the guys that we call as bros out there. To be honest, this is quite dangerous if you ask me, because now people start to think that this is general knowledge that you have to do fasted cardio, which is definitely not the fact, which is why I'm going to bring you to number 3 now. Number 3 is LISS cardio. Now, before we actually start talking about LISS cardio, let's talk about the definition of cardio itself. Cardio is anything that gives you from a rested state into an active state. So typically that's anything really. So what is LISS cardio? LISS cardio is low intense, steady state. This means that you're not going at a super high pace like you would with HIIT training where you're going for 15 seconds really hard, but you're also making sure that you're not going too easy. And how I tell people to typically do this is measure it by a most reliable way. I use my air bike every single time because it's at home, I don't have to go to the gym. And when I'm using my air bike, I only look at the calories that it says there. If my aim is to hit 600 calories in a week, I need to get 150 calories for 4 sessions. Some days may be better than less, but that's the best way to do it. It's the most reliable too, let's be honest. Don't need to get too fancy with this. Now, how fast do I go? I go to what I feel comfortable with. It depends on my timing. To be honest, I go at a pace where I can actually breathe, I can talk, but if I'm trying to sing, it's not going to work. I also get very warm. I almost sweat towards the end of it as well. Typically for a lot of people, this is very easy. The reason why is because, well, it doesn't require any skill like you would do with HIIT training. It also doesn't require you to put yourself in a very fasted state, like fasted training. So you can actually do this after you eat dinner, before you have your next meal, whatever it might be. As long as you have some food in your stomach, you typically feel a little bit better, which once again debunks the myth of trying to do things with less food. You actually want to lose fat with the most amount of food, and LISS training is probably the best one to do it, followed by HIIT training. Anyway, off topic, I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So how I like doing this is I like doing it with some air bike, some cardio with the rower, a treadmill, and even just NEAT training. And for those of you who don't know what NEAT training is, that's non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Fancy word for walking, okay? So what's the energy source when we're using this one? This one is what we call the infinite energy source. And the infinite energy source is going to be first carbohydrates, and then we start to use what we call fat, okay? So once you've burnt through some of that carbohydrate threshold and you start to burn through more, you're going to start using what we call your fat oxidative system. Your fat can only be used when you require energy from your oxygen to break it down. So that's why you breathe in quite a bit. Now that's also you breathing out carbon dioxide. Once again, if my lecturer probably heard me say this, he'd kill me, but I'm 10 years out of uni now, so you can't hurt me anymore, but you still give me nightmares. So I'm now going to list all three of them, which are going to be most practical to burn fat in theory. Now, let me know what you think. Take your time. All right, I'm going to let you know right now. In theory, the ones that are going to help you burn the most amount of fat is going to be first HIIT training, LISS training, and then fasted cardio. The reason why is because fasted and LISS show no net difference, whereas HIIT training actually gives you what we call the EPOC system. EPOC is another thing that we're going to bring in the future, but it's called exercise post-oxygen consumption, where your body requires more oxygen for your body to recuperate from that high intense training, which means you typically will burn more fat and more calories. But once again, that's only for a small amount of people who can actually do it without A, hurting themselves, and that's not me, and B, who can actually push themselves to be that hard. And I think at the end of the day, you burn something like 100 extra calories. So is it really worth it? I'd rather sit on my bike for 10 more minutes. Now, this is the most practical way for you to burn more fat. First one is definitely going to be LISS training. The reason why is you are not going to be putting yourself in danger's way. The reason why is because you're not going to put yourself in harm's way just by trying to push really, really hard for a small amount of time. That's not great. Practical means you can do it for a long time. So that's why I put LISS first. The second one is HIIT training. The reason why I put HIIT training lower is, like I said, it's high risk versus high reward. You do have to risk your body to be able to push a little bit harder, which I do not like. But if you can do it correctly, it will help you out. And what I mean by doing this correctly is starting with lower intervals with a lower rest period, or what you can do is start with higher rest times and lower interval times. Say, for example, you're doing 5 seconds at a medium pace and then 55 seconds at a lighter pace, and you start to slowly bring that down and meet each other. You don't want to hit the point where you're doing 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. That's just going to ask for trouble, personally. And the last one I would say is fasted cardio. The reason why is because I think it feeds into people's fears and it gives people a false sense of what is healthy and sustainable. If you're doing fasted cardio every single day and you're thinking that this is normal, I want you to know that this is me, a 10-year personal training and coach who has specialized in helping people from bodybuilding, powerlifting, and also weightlifting to make weight cuts. Fasted cardio is not the way. You need to find something more sustainable. And hell, I'd rather you do HIIT training and eat properly and also not risk injuries by doing HIIT training with a smarter protocol. Even saying that, for anyone else out there, LISS training is definitely going to be more effective. Combine this with proper nutrition and also saying that with proper training, you don't need to do fasted cardio. Anyway, team, I hope you found this really useful. Like I said, I'm going to be churning out a lot more high quality content. So if you want to make sure you don't miss it, make sure you press subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Now, if you really like this as well, it would mean the world for me for you to be able to share this with some friends or share it with a community of your friends, because in case you haven't noticed, I've actually dedicated a lot of my time and full time into YouTube right now. So it'd be amazing if I could see this grow, but I can't do this without your help, of course. So that also means let me know down in the comments section below, what do you want to learn, and I'll create it for you. Guys, thank you again. Always a pleasure. Take care and keep building momentum.